Hey, how you doing? I hope you're well. I'm Deanna and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to go through my September wrap up. I can't believe that it's already October. This year has gone by so fast. September was a fantastic reading month. I took part in 2 readathons and just read the most amount I possibly could. So first let's talk about the readathons. So I took part in the romance readathon hosted by Maggie's Books and Stuff, and this was Phantom of the Opera themed. I was repping for Team Ballet Dancers, and while we didn't get the crown, we absolutely smashed it in terms of reading and page numbers, and I'm super glad I was able to contribute. And I read a lot of Shifter and Why Choose Romances because that was my team prompts. So of the 15 books I've read, 14 I did count towards the challenge, just because one of them, it was an audiobook and I'd read kind of, 70% in August, so I didn't think it was fair to count it. And then for the Aurelium Magical Readathon, which is hosted by the amazing G from Book Roast, I was attempting to complete my autumn equinox exams for my requested calling, which is the Wild Form Druid, and I managed to complete all my grades for Animal Studies, Art of Illusion, Astronomy, and Restoration, but was missing my distinguished qualification for Shape-Shifting, which was a compass on the cover. I'm still excited to read The Sea of Roses by Opal Rain, so I will probably look at making sure I tick that off and read that before April next year. And maybe I'll just say I got a special consideration and it could extend my exam out. So yeah, overall, super thrilled with my progress. And I'm also obsessed with the way my journal looks for this one. Side note, I am already planning my 2025 reading journal, and I probably will do a setup video because I love reading journal videos. Anyway, onto the bookish stats. As I said, I completed 15 books this month, so that's a lot of books, but also read a lot of chunky books. So of those 15 books, I read 6,443 pages, which is honestly crazy. And I gave an average rating of 4.5 stars. So I had 1 3.5 star, 4 4 stars, 5 4.5 stars, and 5 5 stars. So overall, a completely fantastic reading month. Having a look at the formats, a bit across the board here. So I did read 2 arcs, which was great. I had 4 audiobooks, 7 ebooks, and 2 paperbacks, which is really great to see the paperback physical reading making a small comeback. Okay, so for genres, I was really feeding into the whole gothic vibes of the Phantom of the Opera. So I read 10 paranormal books, also really prepping for the spooky season, which was great. And then the others, I read 2 romance books, 2 fantasy romance, and 1 historical fiction, which it's kind of like magical realism historical fiction, but I figured the history element was the most prominent, so we chucked it in historical fiction. Then moving on to my last little segment, which is series versus standalone. I did manage to read 2 standalone books this month, which was great, and one of them was off my most anticipated reads of the year. And then we're pretty evenly split between first books and sequels, which sucks, but sequels did just win. So we had 6 first books in a series and 7 sequels. So yeah, that's it for the stats breakdown. So let's get into my thoughts and feelings on these books. So I did binge a series, so I will talk about them all together, and I will, like always, leave reviews in the description if I have any. So first things first, I was feeling a little slumpy in August, so I did start the month off with When He Takes by Gabriella Sanz, which is the second book in her Fallen God duet, which focuses on Nero and Blake. And I just thought that this was a fantastic conclusion to Nero and Blake's story. We got to see a lot of character development from both of them. So I also love that we are back in New York and we are diving headfirst into the mafia world. So Nero definitely, in the first book, while he's been missing his mafia lifestyle and the power and the decadence and all that stuff that he had as the consigliere of the Mazzarillo family, he quickly realizes that his main thoughts, feelings, and priorities is really towards Blake and her safety. So while he's given this kind of opportunity of a lifetime for the Ferraro family, who essentially want him dead, said, he is really hesitant to take it because he's happy to kind of pay his dues, keep his life, as long as it means that he can keep Blake healthy, happy, safe, and try and win her love back. So I really did love that progression. He's still like uber possessive, and while logically the safest thing for Blake to do would not be with Nero, he's not really willing to let her go. So he is just going to do everything he can to win her back. Where wildcard Blake is not happy, she is the one who pushes Nero into this very dangerous deal, which is the real premise and plot of this story. And I love that she gets kind of like a 101 mob wife training with the wife of the Don of the family, and she really struggles with her morality. Before this book, you know, she is very black and white, and through this story and through her relationship with Nero, she kind of lives and realizes that there is a gray area, because, you know, Nero is a trained killer. You know, he's a made man. He's in the mafia. He's killed people. He's done some very dangerous things, but he is absolute gentleman towards her. He treats her with more respect and care than any of her previous partners have. So she's kind of grappling with that, and then she kind of has to come to terms with there is no line that she wouldn't cross to protect the people she loves as well. So that was fantastic. And I just love that they've got this kind of forced proximity situation while they're working on this dangerous deal, and Nero definitely uses it to his advantage to try and woo Blake. And overall, completely loved it. Then I finished Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. This is the second book in the Empyrean series, and I was actually surprised. I was kind of worried going into this book because of the mixed reputation it's had. I know people weren't particularly thrilled with the fact that Xaden and Violet were separated for most of this book, and I guess the romance, they are kind of together, but they can't necessarily be together in the same location because of the plot. So it logically made sense why they were separated, and I think it just kind of added to the tension and longing. It did give Violet some time to kind of come to terms with the betrayal and the outcomes that unfold in here. And I don't really want to say much more, but really love the kind of political world in here. Very interested to learn more. Obviously I love the War College setting. The dragons in here are amazing. Taran is just this like grumpy old man, and Dana is this kind of little ray of sunshine, although she's getting a little moody. So the banter between those two were fantastic. Violet's really struggling with the secrets that she's been keeping and wanting to share with her friends, but not knowing if she can fully trust them because of the structure and the way that Basgiath is kind of breaking them down in first year and kind of trying to remold them into mindless soldiers. And it's also not necessarily her secrets to tell. There are a lot of people's lives on the line, so it was interesting to see how she dealt with that while also maintaining her friendships and the outcomes of that. So the steam in here that we do get was spicy. Politics in this world has really kicked off, and there's been some major changes. Like where we were at the start of this book and where we are at the end is very different. So I am really excited for Onyx Storm when that is releasing next year. And also this was one of my 24 books to read in 2024 that Hayden did randomly pick off my shelf, so I'm very excited that I will not have to unhaul this special edition. Then I picked up a little novella, which is Pucking Ever After Volume 1 by Emily Rath. And this was just so sweet. So this is a little collection kind of filled with bonus chapters and stories from the Price family. So this takes place in and around Pucking Around, and we're following Rachel and her guys kind of navigate their relationship after the big grand gesture in Pucking Around. And we also get some point of view chapters from other characters through events throughout it. And I just love these characters, the way they're able to create their little family. I know some people who don't like epilogues, you know, probably aren't going to enjoy this, but I just loved getting to check in with them and see how they're doing after their happily ever after, and getting those kind of like domestic bliss moments and seeing how they're navigating their life. And yeah, it was fantastic, super sweet. And now I'm dying to pick up Pucking Wild, and my copy of Pucking Sweet is over there looking at me, so cannot wait to continue on in this series. Then I picked up Her Soul to Take by Harley LaRue. Finally, this book has been on my TBR for the longest time, and I completely adored it. My goal for this month in October is to finish the rest of this trilogy. So we are following a girl named Ray who's back in her small town, and she is off to finish college. So this is a small town that she grew up in, but her parents had moved to California. They're now retired and sold up their place based in California and have moved to Spain. She does the responsible thing and heads back to her hometown and transfers to the local college in hopes that she will finish her degree and then get herself a big girl job. And in the meantime, she is also operating a YouTube channel where she runs paranormal investigations. The channel is kind of stalling because she is trying to be as authentic as possible. She wholly believes in the supernatural, so there's nothing super dramatic that's happening. She may, you know, catch an apparition or some sounds, but it's not like that kind of dramatic Hollywood horror scene which some other channels have. So she is trying to do a last-ditch effort to make the channel keep going so she can have some money coming in and she won't necessarily have to sell her soul to a corporation and get an office job. So we're in this town, I can't remember what the town is called, and she ends up meeting up with an old friend. She runs a bookstore and the local historic society has donated some books, and in there Ray finds a grimoire. Looks very old, very authentic, and her friend just gifts it to her as like a welcome home gift. So Ray ends up having a last-ditch attempt for her channel, and she's going to do something fake and pretend to summon a demon so that she can get some YouTube views on her channel. So she ends up at this old abandoned church, has the grimoire there, and she is filming, ready to go, and she knows that for absolute certainty that this is going to be fake because she has translated the summoning spell into English, so it can't be real if it's not in Latin, right? And she will absolutely, under no circumstances, use blood in the ritual. However, something goes awry and she ends up cutting her finger and bleeds all over the summoning spell, and to her surprise, the blood seeps into the summoning circle and out pops a demon named Leon, who happens to look rather like the grumpy security guard from the university campus, and it is kind of their story, and I love it. In terms of like the supernatural paranormal, it does kind of play more to that spooky supernatural TV show kind of creepy horror vibes rather than, you know, just your straight up paranormal romance or anything cute and cozy. Ray gives me kind of like a goth Velma from Scooby-Doo, which I absolutely love. And it's so underrated, the fact that she has glasses, and there's a scene in this towards the end where she's thrown into like a pit and everything comes worse because she's lost her glasses and she can't see. So I don't know, that was a fun touch. And Leon is a demon who's been trapped by a family and used as basically their hunting dog. He's a bit pissed about it. The only reason they can do it is because they have a grimoire which has his name in it, so he's trying to find that and destroy it, and obviously he ends up at Ray's beck and call. And yeah, the steam in here was fantastic. I love the spooky vibes. It really gave like folk horror. We have these kind of like elk monsters, which are shadows and animal carcasses. There is a death cult trying to resurrect this fallen god, and it was just so addictive. Very excited. I believe from the vibe I'm getting with the trilogy, the rest of the books kind of circle around the same event because we've seen both of the couples in the other books, Her Soul for Revenge and A Soul for a Witch. So I'm excited to see how it weaves in with the storyline from Her Soul to Take. So if you're in the mood for a paranormal romance with a lot of steam and some kind of folky horror vibes, definitely pick up this one. All right, next up, I couldn't help myself. I wanted a bit of a tone change. So I picked up The Heat of Us by Ileana Lee, which is the third book in her Bond Dissolution Omegaverse series. And in this one, we are following Hazel. And this book is absolute perfection. I just want to go back and reread it right away. I just love the dynamic that Ileana has created with this pack. So she definitely has that kind of build-a-pack vibe. So unlike with Juno in the first book, who seems to have kind of established pack, does, you know, court her, and maybe a few other members are added along the way. These people have all crossed paths and never really got to know each other. So I loved watching that pack bond form between Hazel, Ben, Alex, and Ryder. So yeah, it was fantastic. This book is definitely very like sex positive and sex forward. So Hazel is making money on a social media platform called OmegaFans, so think OnlyFans, and she ends up doing a collaboration with Ryder, who is an alpha who does similar sex social media content, and that's how they are introduced. Hazel has had some trauma trauma. Obviously she met Juno as part of the bond dissolution project, so we don't really know what's happened, but we do open up with a kind of scene where she has a scent-mated match and everything seems so happy and lovely. He's her family friend who's moved into state and they see each other a couple times a year, so it's kind of this childhood friends to lovers, and it's very sweet. So we get that opening and then we see Hazel where she is now, and she refuses to let Alphas close to her, so you kind of get this kind of sinister feeling. She's also not talking to her parents, which is a common thread amongst the four of them. They have some serious family problems. So another thing I love about the pack bond is that they're able to find this kind of family unit, you know, because their biological families are all trash. And yeah, which is very strange. So every time she goes into heat, she does use the heat service. However, she makes sure not to use the same alphas again, which is very odd. Most amigas, if they find comfortable with someone, will use their services each time. And then we have Ben, who is Juno's brother, and I love him so much. He is such a gentle soul, but he's also a bit assertive, and he is kind of like a cinnamon alpha hero, and the way he cares for Hazel and the rest of the guys in the pack, he really kind of does become their prime. And yeah, he first meets Hazel at the end of the last book, and you get this vibe that he is very into Hazel right away, but he doesn't want to scare her off, so they kind of resort to texting each other, have this kind of flirty back and forth, which I love. And then the last man in the trio is Alex, who is the concierge at her fancy apartment building, and he is also studying part-time to be a nurse and is caring for his elderly grandmother, and he's a beta, and I just love the way he kind of seamlessly fits into their pack. Him and Hazel have this bond where they just are obsessed with true crime, and that's what they love to watch all day, every day. The banter between the group of them, the way they're able to find that kind of safety and love and support, it was fantastic. Highly recommend if you're into Amigaverse. I'm sure I made no sense at all, but it is just so fantastic, and I am so grateful that I found this series this year. Taking a bit of a different turn, I picked up Blood Orange by Karina Halley, which is the first book in her Dracula duet. So I love the fact that Karina Halley has gone ahead and created these like gothic dark romances, which are retellings of famous gothic heroes. So I know she's done Dracula, I think she's done Sleepy Hollow, I can't remember the other one she's done, but very excited to read all of them. So it opens with our main character Vatu basically saying that Bram Stoker was a fraud and what he wrote was absolute false lies, and he is here to set the record straight. So we open up with him in Sweden in 1714, and at this point the Russians have taken over, and he is a farmer. He's fallen in love with the general's daughter. They are going to run away together because they're the whole star-crossed lovers things. They're not meant to be together. She ends up pregnant. However, as they've decided to run away together, her father finds out and he kills Mina in front of Vatu. And what Vatu doesn't know about his heritage, he was a fostered kid, is that he is a born vampire, and it's his 35th birthday, and just after Mina dies, he transforms, or his vampire self awakens, and he massacres the Russian general. So yeah, we've got born vampires in here. There are turned vampires, but they are too dangerous. Think Jasper's newborn vampire army in Twilight. So men turn into vampires at the age of 35 and females turn into vampires at 21, but they've kind of got that dark, deadly, sexy, dangerous thing going. They are very prone to bloodlust. So in the modern day, or a modernish, I'm really not sure when the bulk of this book is set. I'm getting kind of like maybe 90s vibes potentially, just from what's happening and the ending. So the vampires are not to kill any more people because we're in a modern age and they don't want people to start hunting them down. So they create these BDSM-ish clubs where they're able to feed and feast and fuck, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, and basically they need to have almost like a spotter at the gym standing by just to make sure while they're feeding they don't go into bloodlust and kill the humans. So we have our main girl Dahlia, who is a witch / vampire hunter. She's given me kind kind of Buffy vibes, or it kind of is slightly giving me vibes of the Guild Hunter series as well. And something happened and she's been ousted from her coven, and now she's been given one last task, that she needs to get close to Vaatu and kill him to be kind of reinstated in her coven. And Vaatu is currently moonlighting as a professor at this music conservatorium in Venice, and she is an organ player, so which is, you know, coincidentally his instrument of choice. So she is going to attend the conservatory to get close to him to kill him. While she's there, she's found out that her mission has changed and she actually needs to get close to Vaatu to get close to 2 other vampires who have murdered a witch in Ireland and has taken her grimoire, which is very important because they now have the ability to potentially open up a portal into another world, which is where the vampires come from, and they can bring more dark, dangerous creatures into the world. So loved the dark gothic vibes, love the dark academia vibes, the banter between Dahlia and Vaatu as they're kind of like, will they, won't they get together, but she's also like, I'm gonna kill you vibes was great. It took a dip for me when they started sleeping together. There is this kind of hardcore S&M thing that props up like straight away, but I just didn't like the way it was dealt with consent wise. Not that I haven't read like non-con or dubious consent books before, I just think it was there was a weirdness to it with this kind of reincarnation, and Vaatu just assuming that because he thinks he knows her past selves that she doesn't need to like talk about it. And yes, I don't know, I just got the bit of the ick, but the way it ended was wild, and I will be interested to read the sequel, Black Rose, because I need to know what's going to happen and need to know how he is going to recover from that ending. But yeah, this was a really fun time and enjoyed getting to read another book off my physical TBR. Then I picked up Dreadful Desires by Lucy Lark, and I am so sad that this book has been on my TBR since Rare Melbourne a couple of years ago. I can't believe I hadn't picked this up sooner. This is literally like, this and the next series I'm going to talk to are like perfect books for me. So this is very much Penny Dreadful with a Why Choose Romance. So my comp titles for you are obviously Penny Dreadful, the TV series, plus A Lady of Rooksgrave Manor, plus Stalking Jack the Ripper. Like that's the vibes this book's giving, and it is immaculate. This is set in the late 1800s in London, and as most of these books happen, Jack the Ripper is out and about. So we open with Bex's father having been brutally murdered, and he was a doctor and a coroner, and he actually did train her to follow in his footsteps, which is uncommon for women in this day and age to be part of any kind of medical field. So she is reeling with the fact that that happened, and then as they've taken his body away and as they're cleaning their shared office, she finds a safe under a rug under her father's desk, and she finds a strange journal. It seems to have some study that he'd been working on, but it's been decoded, so her father has used multiple different languages to hide the information there. And then very quickly after that, her father's assistant Hugh invites her to this standing appointment that her father has, and she realizes that her father had created a blood bond with some supernatural creatures, including Dr. Hugh Jackal and James Hyde. We have a vampire named Nikolai. There is a Scottish werewolf named Rory. We have Dorian Gray and a dangerous creature called Sweeney, and they let her know that now that the blood bond has been formed, the only way to protect them is to continue the blood bond, but that can only be continued by someone of the same bloodline, and in return they offer her to continue her father's research on them. And it was just so good. I love Bex. She does come across as this kind of like very strong, very intelligent, and this kind of cult's not the right word. She's just very like thought and logic driven. In terms of the steam, it is great. There is a fantastic steamy scene in the carriage with Dorian Gray, and an even better monster romance werewolf scene in the cage. So this book ended on a cliffhanger, and I really need to know what's happening, but unfortunately there is no ETA on when we are getting the second book, or if the second book will ever be published. So if this at all sounds like something that you would like, or Why Choose murder mystery / gothic romance with the who's who of gothic monsters, I think you should definitely pick this up, and maybe if we get more people to love and read this book, we will get the second book, which is supposed to be called Dreadful Delirium. So yes, highly recommend picking this one up if any of that sounds up your alley. Then I had a series completely take over my life, and that is the Her Vicious Beast series by E.P. Barley. So I read the prequel novella, Her Vicious Beasts, the beginning, Her Feral Beasts, Her Rabbit Beast, and Her Psycho Beasts, and I am so obsessed, and I'm kind of sad that I binged them all now, because now I'm gonna have to wait a long time for Her Tortured Beasts, but does give me an excuse to reread them before the 4th book comes out. So this is a truly fascinating world. It's a paranormal world set in Australia, which I freaking love. You know I love that. And we have these animalia who are essentially shifters, and they can be anything. We have shark shifters, bear shifters, snake shifters, your wolves, lions, eagles, dragons, phoenixes. There was even mention of a platypus shifter and a Komodo dragon shifter. Like, I'm talking like we have all of it. So I'm completely fascinated by this. The shifter world is kind of broken up into these courts with each of the main shifter families, like the wolves, the cats, the marine animals, the birds, I'm sure I'm missing one, all getting a seat at the council where the minor shifters kind of nominate who they want to represent them. So we are following a girl named Aurelia, and she is the disowned, banished daughter of the Serpent King. She has been banished since her 13th birthday, when she didn't present as a serpent and in fact presented as something rare and very sought after. And also she was given a prophecy. So once they present, they're given a prophecy about their mates. So she was given a prophecy that she would have 5 mates from 5 different orders, which would be a dead giveaway for what her animalia form is. So her father disowns her and forces her through fear alone to keep her identity a secret. Since she was 13, living in this crappy bungalow, working at her aunt's like IGA supermarket and trying to scrape by. She has enrolled into a university and is hoping to just disappear, change her name, and never be seen again. However, her father ropes her in for one last job. She's an exceptional healer, and that kind of sparks our crazy plot where she is sold into marriage to this old man. She has been framed for murder and arson, is on the run, and her mates, who she never was supposed to interact with, are broken from prison and have been hired by her father to hunt her down and bring her back to the Serpent Court to be executed. And it is wild. While she's on the run, just trying to survive, she's got no plans, no thoughts. She just needs to escape. She's intercepted by Lyle, who is the deputy headmaster of the Animus Academy, which is a reform school for rabid and criminal shifters, and she is offered sanctuary. At this point, she's got no other options. She's got to go. However, she is not expecting that once she enrolls that she will be trapped in the academy with 3 of her 5 mates who have been hired to kill her. We have Scythe, who is a cold, ruthless shark shifter and head of a criminal enterprise. We have his half-brother, a slightly psychotic but very golden retriever wolf shifter named Savage, and then we have Xander, who is a grumpy dragon shifter who literally wants nothing to do with Aurelia. And it is fantastic. I can't wait to continue on with this series. If you like books that have the wild plot of the mate games but have that kind of intense bully romance, enemies to lovers of the Bonds That Tie series by Jay Bree, you need to pick this series up. I love the way that the romance is developing. I'm finding the world endlessly fascinating. I love that we've squeezed in a magical school, because that is my favorite thing, and it is just so good. The female friendships that Aurelia forms with the girls there is amazing. So I think overall the books that are out, Her Feral Beast, Her Rabbit Beast, and Her Psycho Beast, are all over 500 pages, with the novella being around 150. So I would have read nearly 2,000 pages in under a week, because I just couldn't put this series down. So I could continue to ramble about this series for a very long time, but please, if you love paranormal, if you love Why Choose Romance, if you love an Enemies to Lovers, you really need to pick up this series, because it is fantastic, and I'm so excited for Her Tortured Beast. I will be pre-ordering that the minute that pre-order goes out, and also go knocking on EP Barley's door to see if I can get a review copy for it. Continuing on with the very long books, I picked up Smoke by Sarah Yeager, which is the first books in her Ardalan Bloodline series, and this just gives me like the old school paranormal romance vibes, and we're following wolf shifters. There is a slight romantic suspense, and it just felt so cozy. Even though it's a series I've never read before, it gave me those like early 2000s, mid 2000s paranormal romance stories, and I freaking loved it. So in here we're following Talia, who's human, and she is the daughter of an American senator and an ambassador. However, she wants literally nothing to do with politics. She is sick of it. She's been raised in the political world and is just over people judging her for what she says, what she doesn't say, just the intense scrutiny. She wants literally nothing to do with any of that. So she abandoned her parents' hopes that she would become a political science major and then go into politics, and is actually wanting to be an archivist, work in like museums and restore artworks, and she's managed to get herself a very competitive and amazing internship at the Smithsonian, where she will run education classes while also helping restore their art collection. So she is like, I want nothing to do with you. I am just going to do my thing and live a great life. However, her mother is a conservative senator who is advocating for some quite extreme restrictive policies in regards to shifters. So shifters are out and about this world. We do seem to have, from what I'm seeing, we've got not just wolves, but the wolves are the ones who are in charge. And her mother is pushing for them to be sterilized, for them to register as if they were like sex offenders. There's a registry for them, and if they display any sort of aggressive behavior, they would be execute them on sight. So while this is happening and her mother is trying to push through these laws, Talia ends up as a target from shifters who are wanting to, you know, scare her mother into changing their mind. So she ends up being roped back into this political landscape, even though she didn't want to, and ends up having to withdraw from classes, withdraw from her internship, and her parents have hired her a bodyguard named Cade. Now, Cade is the abdicated king of the Ardalan bloodline, and he has a very special gift, which is that he has the wolf called the Leviathan, and he is like the king among kings. However, after abdicating the throne, which he got after challenging his father, who was going to sell his sister off to a mate that she was not interested in, his wolf hasn't spoken to him in almost 11 years. He abdicated the throne, left it to his slimy brother, went into the army, and is now working in a private security firm. So he is the best of the best and has been hired by Talia's parents, despite her mother's extreme prejudice, to protect their daughter. And it is this road trip romance which has fated mates. We have a lot of political intrigue. I love getting to learn about the shifter politics and how that bleeds into just the regular politics of this world. And Cade has his family pressuring him to take the throne back because their brother is not helping the situation at all and is in fact being quite antagonistic and adding fuel to the fire. We do have a fated mates, but Talia is your typical like bookish girl. She's a bit awkward, a bit uncomfortable, and also is human, so she doesn't believe in mates. So she's a bit like, really? Are we meant to be together? Are you being serious? Are you being genuine? But it does mean that there are these moments where Cade like has to prove that he's definitely interested. And yeah, there is a slight not communicating properly, but we do get over that and really just love this introduction to this world. I am excited to dive into the rest of the series because I know Cade's sister and brother will also get a book. Loved this romance. It was very, once it happened, like it was like, kiss already. And once it did, it was so good. There is a third act breakup, which was a bit understandable, but I did like the way they got back together. And this book series does give me like that kind of traditional paranormal romance, so I can just feel that. Completely loved it. This book is like 750 pages and I flew through it in 2 days. So good. Then I took a slight break from romance and I picked up The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Catherine Arden. Now, I love Catherine Arden's The Winter Night trilogy. The way she's able to create these historically accurate worlds and feed in folklore was just fantastic. So when I found out her adult debut was coming out, I knew I needed to snap it up and I adored it. It is set around World War I, and the reason why, again, I didn't put it necessarily in fantasy is because I read Catherine's author's note, and the way she describes the changing in technology, like it feels quite magical. So, you know, we've got scenes of these men in the trenches and it's kind of the birthplace of the modern world. We've got weapons that can do things that they've never seen in warfare. They've got grenades and machine guns, and it's just quite scary and feels quite steampunky, which I really loved. So in this one, we are following a combat nurse named Laura, and she's been honorably discharged after her hospital was attacked, and she's had some shrapnel lodged in her leg, so she's dealing with that. She heads back to Halifax, where a ship explodes and absolutely decimates their town, and she loses her family while she's trying to deal with the fact that her parents are now dead, and she's been working really long hours in this makeshift hospital trying to make sure those who were injured in the explosion and are still living can survive. She receives a box of Freddie, who is her brother's thing, with a very vague note to say that he has been killed in war. However, having worked as a combat nurse, she found it weird that both of his dog tags were given to her, so she has this sinking feeling that he is still alive. She is currently living with a group of elderly women who are spiritualists, so again, I love that element of the late 1800s, turn of the century spiritualism movement, and they conduct a seance which Spirit advises Laura that her brother is still alive. So she ends up wanting to figure out what's happened to Freddie and volunteers to head back to Belgium and assist on the war effort in hopes of getting answers. At this stage, she's pretty stubborn and is convinced that he is dead, but wants to find more information out than the vague note that was posted to her, and it was just magical. It had the steampunk vibes. There is some horror. We also get point of views from Freddie, who ends up trapped underground with a German soldier named Hans, and they fight to escape. And there is this whole beautiful magical realism scene where they come across this man who is offering them safety as long as you give him stories, and he is going around making music out of the stories, and you lose your mind. So I think that was a beautiful exploration of like what the devil would do. Like, it's giving like The Devil Went Down to Georgia vibes if, you know, he was floating about a war zone. And it was just this beautiful exploration of war trauma essentially, and just loved Catherine Arden's writing, loved the lyrical nature of it, and completely adored this. The way she was able to get to that feel of the Great War, World War I. And yeah, I thought it was fantastic, that juxtaposition of these modern technologies that are really zooming now that the Industrial Revolution has happened. And it does feel like magic and otherworldly. Like, her mother at one stage, you know, thinks it's going to be the end of times. Like, the Great War is essentially the Book of Revelations come to life. So it was just beautiful. If you enjoyed The Boy Made of Snow by Chloe Mayer, I would highly recommend picking up The Warm Hands of Ghost. It gives that same vibe of wartime with this magical realism element. And alternately, if you've really loved The Warm Hands of Ghost and you want something else to read, I'd highly recommend picking up The Boy Made of Snow. It's so beautiful, and interspersed through them is fairy tales, so that's where that kind of magical element comes from. But yes, was beautiful. And then I picked up The Point of No Return by Devon Sinclair, which got me so many points for the romance readathon because it's a Phantom of the Opera retelling with a Why Choose Romance, and it was a fun time. I feel like I really need to watch the Phantom of the Opera. I'm sure I missed a lot of things, but in this one we are following Christine. It's set in the modern day, and she has become virally famous after she was filmed singing her favorite opera aria after a very long rehearsal that her and her ballet friends were completing, and she just skyrockets to fame. So much so that she is asked to audition for the lead role in this opening back of this French opera house, and she is going to play Joan of Joan of Arc. And it's supposed to be this kind of reopening of this opera house that burnt down centuries ago, and they're going to play the same opera that played when it was burnt. So she is kind of struggling with her fame, which I really like to see. There's some backstabbing cattiness as one of the other girls who is her understudy thinks that she stole her role. And no phantom, but we do have the romance coming in the form of 3 gargoyles. They are trapped in the opera house. I think this is the first book I've read of Devon Sinclair's which has like monsters in it. Oh no, I did read the Dragon Shifter one. But yeah, it was interesting. We had Marcus, Eric, and Andre as the gargoyles. So they've been trapped in this opera house and are cursed. So they are stoned during the day, and during the night they turn into humans, and they can leave the opera house, but they have to stay in like a radius. So they are instantly drawn to Christine, and they realize that she she is their mate. And yeah, it's their romance developing as Christine goes through the opera. We're trying to figure out how to get them uncursed and so they can leave the opera house. We do have some excellent spice in here. I think I would have gotten a little bit more out of it if I knew much more about the Phantom of the Opera. I'm sure I'm missing lots of clues and hints, but I love the Paris setting. I love Devon Sinclair, the way she writes a Why Choose Romance, so I thought that was a lot of fun. And yeah, I just really enjoyed this depiction of fame and kind of an instant fame. So yeah, I would be interested to reread this if and when I watch The Phantom of the Opera. And then last but not least, I finish up the month with That Time I Got Drunk and Yeeted a Love Potion at a Werewolf by Kimberly Lemming, and I read this in one sitting. I think I picked it up on the 30th of September. I had a averagey day at work and I just sat down and read this, and this is so much fun. I love this fantasy romance world that Kimberly Lemming has created. This is the second book in her Mead Mishap series, and we are following Bree, who is at a festival with her best friend Cinnamon, who was the heroine of the first book, and this slimy guy who lives near her, and she seems to think that only is interested in her because their farms are next to each other. So I guess this guy is a bit sleazy, a bit bleh, and he's thinking that if he marries Bree, he can just take over her farm. And she's pelting baked potatoes at him to like keep him away from her and Cinnamon as they're just trying to have a girls' night. And he comes back with a sparkly, fancy smoking cocktail, which Bree's like, I don't like the looks of that. So she picks up the drink and goes to throw it in the man's face, but he's actually surprisingly agile and ducks, and it smacks Felix in the face, who is a lovable werewolf, and he instantly sees her and says, "You are my mate." And what comes together is this kind of beautiful, funny, chaotic relationship. And I really did enjoy the idea of consent in here, because Felix is very much convinced that she is his mate and knows that she is his mate despite the potion. So he escaped with the demon in the first book, so he knows what it's like to be under a magic spell. So he does feel that a little bit lightly, but knows that she's his mate. But from Bree's point of view, she's just flung a love potion at this guy, and he's now like professing his undying love. So she's trying to be like, once the potion wears off, like we'll see then. And it is just so much fun, so funny. Felix again given golden retriever vibes as he breaks into her house just to make sure she's okay, but then proceeds to like cook her breakfast and do the dishes and do all her chores. And yes, it was just so much fun. He comes on very strong and Bree's not really sure how to take it, and I just love their dynamic. This was sweet, funny, steamy, and I'm very excited to pick up the last book, That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Human. So there you go. There are the 15 books I read in September. Comment down below and let me know what your favorite read of September was, or you can leave me a, let's go with like a skull emoji for the gothic vibes of the books I read this month. Please like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content from me. I'll be posting new videos every Sunday. Linked in the description box below will be all the books I mentioned, any reviews I have, and links to my social media channels if you'd like to talk to me or follow me on any other corner of the internet. Anyway, that's all from me today, guys. I hope you're doing all kinds of well, and I will speak to you soon. See ya!